entirely, I move that Dáil Éireann recognises that the universal social charge is an unjust and regressive tax, bearing down most heavily on those least able to afford it. The universal social charge affects people earning as little as €77 per week. The universal social charge is indiscriminate, and it affects someone earning €100,000 at the same rate as someone earning €16,016. Low-income workers, including medical card holders, working lone parents and working widows who were exempt from the health and income levies.
Excuse me, Deputy. Sorry, if I could ask for some order in the chamber there, please. Thank you. Sorry, Deputy.
Low-income workers, including medical card holders, working lone parents and working widows who were exempt from the health and income levies, which the universal social charge replaced, are no longer exempt. Coupled with the changes to tax credits and bans introduced in Budget 2011, the universal social charge has increased the burden of taxation on the working poor. And even though the levy system was flawed, there was a greater level of progressivity in it, and calls on the Government to abolish the universal social charge and as an interim measure, reinstate the health and income levies and conduct an immediate impact assessment of levies as part of an overall reform towards a streamlined and progressive taxation system. Sinn Féin has introduced that motion tonight to the House to move to address the grotesque situation where the burden of the worst financial crisis the state has ever seen has fallen on those with the lowest incomes. Those people who were hanging on by their fingertips last year are now struggling with the additional burden of the universal social charge, and which has resulted in serious cuts in the incomes of the lowest paid in society. The charge introduced in last December's budget has proved Scrooge-like, and it effectively makes a supposedly temporary emergency income levy a permanent fixture in our taxation system. By applying the universal social charge to the widest possible income base, with minimal exemptions, what was effectively done was to introduce an alternative tax system for those on low incomes. The universal social charge, therefore, is little more than a working poor tax. The new charge disproportionately affects certain sections of Irish society. It hits low-income workers by significantly shifting the tax burden away from the high earners and on those on lower pay. And yet there is no inability to survive clause available for the low-paid workers. There is no amnesty for the pain of cuts to incomes and increases in consumer prices. There is no stress test on the households to figure out and determine what support they need from the state to survive. This charge is regressive in the extreme. As in the days of Charles Haughey, we are not all tightening our belts, just the lower paid and society's poorest. The replacement of the income levy and health levy with the new universal social charge has increased the level of inequality in the earnings distribution. The universal social charge of 2% is borne by those earning incomes upwards of €4,004. That is people earning just as little as €77 per week. A tragic thing is anyone earning as little as €1 above this limit will be liable to pay the universal social charge on all of their income. It is perhaps a measure of the dire straits in which we have been thrust into that even teenage children doing the paper round or the college students working at weekend will now be forced to pay tax on this pocket money income. The rate of the universal social charge increases to 4% at €10,037 and to 7% at €16,017. That is how progressive this measure was. Somebody on €308 a week is paying the same charge at the same rate as somebody on €3,000 a week. Where is the fairness in that? These changes have led to an increase in the numbers of working poor, and they are less progressive than the combination of the health levy and income levy that it is replacing. There was no consideration of ability to pay, no consideration of how many thousands of people would be thrust into poverty. Not even an impact assessment was carried out before this measure was introduced, and no impact measure carried out since to see the effects, the real effects that this is having on thousands of people across our state. 3 weeks ago, Fine Gael and Labour set out their stall in their programme for government. They have bought themselves some time by postponing the decision on the future of the universal social charge by proposing another review. They also proposed at least 32 other reviews in the programme for government, and we have seen no terms of reference has been set down or decided upon. A caimare na will acamre maigulor. Na will acamre maigulor than the kete agus na milche daine at a vrú shocker and kain lochta shaw. Ní chorisha bia an table agus ní yilish an the billy. Agus ní féidir lina daine teflivrú marial an kain lochta shaw a anart. Gajid jeru na biene sa doyes goal an acamre shaw ray ag party in lochta bre agus party Fine Gael. The government need to stand before the people of this state and make their intentions known now. Do they intend to abolish this tax? Do they intend to extend it? Or do they intend to leave it? With the arrival of a new government, there exists a great opportunity to simplify the tax system. There is an opportunity to address the endemic imbalances in the system, where those in low incomes are disproportionately shouldering the burden of taxation. When the former Minister for Finance, Brian Lenihan, introduced the universal social charge in his budget speech last December, he said he wanted to move steadily in the direction of an income tax system that is fair, universal in its application and more easily understood. But what he did was create an alternative tax system for those in low incomes. There was nothing fair about it. The only thing that was easily understood was the government's readiness to plunder the incomes of the poorest in society. PAYE and PRSI are now accompanied by a new tax. The universal social charge is simply a consolidation of the nation's bank debt into one weekly, monthly payment of the nation's workforce. And of course, people on lower incomes are more reliant on the state services, and they are also suffering the double whammy of cutbacks under the austerity drive. The universal social charge, Minister, should be abolished, and the previous tax regime, the income levy and health contribution levy, should be reinstated for the interim only. We do not pretend that the introduction of the levies on top of income tax was a good thing. In fact, we opposed them. However, while the levies themselves were unwelcome, they were at least introduced in a progressive manner. The reason the wealthiest have gained from the universal charge was because the income levy had a progressive rate structure, while the top rate of USC applies regardless of whether you earn, for example, €20,000 or €200,000.
The Deputy has 2 minutes.
Both parties in government signalled during the election campaign that they would maintain the low tax model. However, low tax does not equate with a fair tax model. A low income tax model hides the high stealth tax structure that is central to the Irish tax system. Instead, what Ireland should be doing is building a fairer tax system by creating a progressive tax base that taxes fairly and equalises wealth. In order to ensure that income taxes are progressive, the system should consist of a minimum of 3 tax bands and possibly more. The key here in all of this is to have a transparent, streamlined income tax system without levies, charges or stealth taxes. And the first step in moving towards this system must be the abolition of the universal social charge, reverting temporarily back to the previous system, which included some progressive elements in its administration. It is from this system that a reform of the taxation system should stem. The people of this state simply cannot afford to wait for a review of the universal social charge. The Minister for Finance, Michael Noonan, said during the passage of the Finance Bill 2011, what he said was that the floor of the universal social charge, about €4,000, represents a very low income base.
If I could ask the Deputy to begin to conclude.
I'll conclude in this. And the Minister should accept an amendment to raise the threshold perhaps by €1,000. So according to the Minister for Finance, and if the government agrees that it is okay for somebody on €97 to pay tax, well, is this what we're to expect from the review? It is very clear, and Sinn Féin is consistent on this here, the universal social charge must be abolished. I commend the motion to the House.